To My Dear and Loving Husband by Anne Bradstreet, 1678. If ever two were one, then surely we. If ever man were loved by wife, then thee. If ever wife was happy in a man, compare with me, ye women, if you can. I prize thy love more than whole mines of gold, or all the riches that the East doth hold. My love is such that rivers cannot quench, nor aught but love from thee give recompense. Thy love is such I can no way repay. The heavens reward thee manifold, I pray. Then while we live, in love let's so persever, that when we live no more, we may live ever. American poetry begins, in effect, with a love poem. Anne Bradstreet wrote this poem for her husband, Simon, in the middle of the 17th century, and it has become the first statement from colonial America of a woman's love for a man. Though Bradstreet, as we will see, wrote about many more topics than her husband, it is her poem about and an address to her family more than any other poem that endeared her to the world. Anne was born in England to a Puritan father. When her father took charge of the handsome and capable Simon Bradstreet, the young Anne fell in love with him. They were married after his collegiate study, and in 1630 headed to the New World together. Anne was only 18, but she had been raised in an age of great literary ferment that prepared her for the greatness that was to flow from her. She was raised on the 1611 King James Bible, published just a year before she was born, and when she was 11, the first folio of Shakespeare's plays was published. We know from her own writings that her favorite poet was Du Bartas, a Huguenot poet of the 16th century, praised both for his poems and his Protestant fervor. In her association with the leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, Anne became forever associated with the particular Puritan fervor of that group. They were a people more Protestant than any that had come before them, dissenting not only from Roman Catholicism, but also the Protestant Church of England. The Puritans deemed the English Church still too Catholic in its worship and doctrine. They wanted freedom to follow the Scriptures, the King James Bible in particular, in the ways they saw fit, with no king or bishop dictating their actions. Anne's father and her husband Simon proved to be important leaders in the new colony of Massachusetts, and Anne settled into a rugged life of wife and mother in a New England which lacked all the amenities of the Old England. Still, Anne wrote poems, the first volume of which were published in London in 1650. We know from her poem A Dialogue Between Old England and New that she was aware of and mourned the Civil War that broke out in the 1640s. And from poems like A Few Verses on the Burning of Our House, we know that colonial life was a dangerous and ephemeral affair. Houses burned down with all one's worldly possessions. Women and children often died in childbirth. Some of Bradstreet's most affecting poems are about her own losses of family members to illness and tragedy. In the face of this world of difficulty, both politically and domestically, Anne's poem to Simon is worth remark. It is not the naive infatuation of Shakespeare's Juliet, nor the bitter knowing cynicism of Shakespeare's later sonnets. It is an ardent love that knows what long love is. Let's look at the poem in detail. It's always good to start with an attention to form, as the formal choices a poet makes determine so much of how a poem turns out. This is a poem of 12 lines, arranged into rhyming couplets. The poem is just 2 lines shy of sonnet length, and yet the rhyming couplets indicate that Bradstreet has not intended to write a sonnet. As we'll discuss later, sonnets use rhyme schemes that highlight the tensions and turns of argumentative thought. Rhyming couplets are much more straightforward, lending themselves both to dramatic dialogue, as in the plays of Shakespeare, or pithy aphorism. Bradstreet begins her poem with a strong line of iambic pentameter. And let's remember that iambic pentameter is 5 iambic feet in a row. Iambic feet are unstressed, stressed. And if you do unstressed, stressed 5 times in a row, that's iambic pentameter. If ever two were one, then surely we. The stresses are on the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th, and 10th syllables, which means that the words two, one, sure, and we are highlighted. These include key terms used in the King James Bible to describe marriage. We first encounter this language in Genesis 2:24. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. This verse comes just after the first man and woman, Adam and Eve, are created and given to one another by God to be spouses for one another and populate the earth. Adam and Eve, though they have not had an earthly father and mother, become the pattern for all humans. A man will leave his parents and unite with his wife. In some way, perhaps mysterious, they who were two will now be significantly one. This language of two becoming one appears again in the writings of the Apostle Paul in the New Testament book of Ephesians. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife, even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. The Apostle Paul here gives the Genesis account a spiritual parallel. Just as a man should love his wife in a self-sacrificial manner, just as he unites himself with her in marriage, so Christ gives up his own life for the church and unites it to himself. This both helps Paul's audience understand a difficult spiritual matter, namely the connection between Christ and the church, and it raises the rather more mundane matter of marriage into a mysterious, even mystical realm. The beauty and awe of the union of husband and wife is on the level of religious profundity, not mere cultural convention or biological necessity. Let the wife see that she reverence her husband. Though this may ring old-fashioned, even backward to modern ears, it is an admonition that Bradstreet at least took seriously, and this poem can be seen as an exercise in proper reverencing of the husband. We are so used to jaded descriptions of the marital relationship, even in poetry, that ardent love for a husband almost seems inappropriate. Aren't husbands lazy or tiresome at best? Well, not for Bradstreet. The perspective here is of a woman in love, and a woman who is sure in her love. Her deeply biblical first line suggests that she would like to be seen as a proper, even a prime example of the Genesis 2:24 ideal, two becoming one, as it was in the beginning. Lest we get confused by the more abstract language of two becoming one, Bradstreet clarifies in the second line, "If ever man were loved by wife, then thee." Simon is the paradigm of the man whose wife truly loves him. And in the third and fourth lines, Bradstreet is quick to clarify that she has no complaints. "If ever wife were happy in a man, compare with me, ye women, if ye can." This "if ye can" strikes me as a bit of not inappropriate braggadocio. She is calling out other wives, asking them to compare how happy they are to her prime happiness. There's a confidence in these lines which establishes a precedent. The female poet will stay neither silent nor shy. This is affirmed by Bradstreet in the opening poem of her initial collection. "Let Greeks be Greeks and women what they are. Men have precedency and still excel. It is but vain unjustly to wage war. Men can do best, and women know it well. Preeminence in all and each is yours. Yet grant some small acknowledgment of ours. Bradstreet asks not for precedency or preeminence, but merely an acknowledgement of a place at the table, a place in the conversation. These lines have been variously read as shy and sly, but they sit in a context that is rather remarkable. A young middle-class wife and mother living on a wild scrap of ground far from all sophistication and finery, who is writing a poetry of great fervor and meaning, who is publishing alongside poets like Andrew Marvell and John Milton. Merely to include her name in the same breath as these luminaries is to begin to question exactly how small our acknowledgement of her should be. And here, you're listening to a video that is placing Bradstreet, someone who lived 350 years ago, as the first video in this collection celebrating the greatest poetry of America. Our acknowledgement will not be small if we're acknowledging Bradstreet. Our acknowledgement of female poetry in America will echo down the ages. And Bradstreet is nothing less than the founding mother of American verse, who makes possible and makes a place for people like Wheatley, Dickinson, and others. Let's look at the next couplet. I prize thy love more than whole mines of gold, or all the riches that the East doth hold. Surely Bradstreet was not unaware of the devastating Spanish obsession with finding gold in the New World. Indeed, much of the English polemics against the Spanish throughout the 16th and 17th centuries focused on their greed and abusive treatment of the American natives in their search for treasure. But here, the husband is greater than the gold, whether discovered in the New World or back in the storied East. Other civilizations may have as their wealth material hoards, but this New England will have a greater wealth, that of wholesome human love, reciprocally given and received. The next couplet draws again from the language of the King James Bible, this time from the Song of Solomon. My love is such that rivers cannot quench, nor aught but love from thee give recompense. In Song of Solomon 8, verse 7, the Hebrew poet writes, Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man would give all the substance of his house for love, it would be utterly condemned. Bradstreet trades the terms water and floods for the more specific rivers, but the sense is the same. Her love is so strong that it cannot be quenched. And skipping the idea of giving all the substance of his house, she drives home the overall point. Only love is the proper recompense for love. Love overmatches both earthly wealth and natural disasters. And as we will see, love even overmasters death. Before looking at the last four lines, it would be worthwhile to attend to the rhyme between quench and recompense. Unlike the we-thee rhyme that opens the poem, wherein two single-syllable personal pronouns are rhymed, quench and recompense rhymes two words that are different parts of speech and different lengths. Such a rhyme always brings with it surprise. We expect we and thee, just as we expect cat and mat. But the great poets discern sonic connections across types and tones of words. Just as the meter shows the inherent rhythmic patterns in words and phrases, so rhyme reveals likenesses above and beyond meaning in the realm of pure sound. In the last four lines, Bradstreet sets her sights on the heavenly. Thy love is such I can no way repay. The heavens reward thee manifold, I pray. Then while we live in love let's so persever, that when we live no more, we may live ever. Though Bradstreet had before said that love is the only proper recompense for love, she now proposes that the heavens themselves must repay Simon for his love for her. Yes, she loves him, but his love is so extraordinary that she does not expect to match it. This ties to the biblical principle first hinted at in the opening line. Just as the church is not, in Puritan theology, worthy of the love of Christ, and just as the love of the church for Christ will always fall short of what he deserves, so is the wife's love, even at its height, unworthy of the husband. Far from leading to despair for the church or the wife, this spiritual principle for the Puritan is meant to lead to an exulting in the gracious, unmerited favor of God, pouring from heaven down onto the grateful believer. And there is a hope that the blessed state of paradise will somehow make right once again, because of God's abundant grace, all that had fallen short on earth. The poem ends with a call to commit to an eternal vision of love. They will continue in this remarkable love in such a way that it will help them transition into the eternal life of heaven. The odd verb persever can be read in several ways. First and most basically, as a call not to betray the love that they have established. Such a betrayal would not only lead to marital disaster, but also an endangering of their eternal destiny. The sin of adultery, as would be emphasized by Hawthorne, was a grave evil for the Puritans, and resonated with the language of the King James Bible about unfaithfulness to God. This analogy of apostasy and adultery is especially strong in the Old Testament prophets' warnings to the people of Israel against the worship of false gods. Given that the Puritans in New England thought of themselves as a new Israel, these admonitions were particularly potent. Thus, the stakes of Bradstreet's love poem are such that to falter in love would be a failing not just of one person or one relationship, but a failing that would contaminate the whole social and spiritual project of Puritan New England. And yet there is another sense to the word persever. In Puritan theology, derived from the teachings of the reformer John Calvin, believers were given assurance of the perseverance of the saints, which meant that all those who were truly chosen and regenerated by God would be kept secure in their salvation until they died and were taken to glory. True Christians need not worry that they would, quote-unquote, lose their salvation, for God would never let them do so. Still, Puritan literature is filled with anxiety about whether one was truly called by God, truly saved to begin with, and thus draws on this concept of perseverance of the saints by giving it a romantic dimension. The saints, whether or not they are anxious about God's attitude toward them, can and will show their faithfulness through maintaining both sexual fidelity and ardent unifying love. And this show of faithfulness will be a gateway into the eternal life of heaven. It may be helpful to remember that when this poem entered literary history, most of the love poems that we hold dear, from Byron's She Walks in Beauty Like the Night to Elizabeth Barrett Browning's How Do I Love Thee, Let Me Count the Ways, had not yet been written. Bradstreet's is an ancestor of these poems, especially of Browning's. It stands with the greatest of the love poems of the metaphysical poets like John Donne, but it lacks their wry, masculine strutting. It is by turns pious, confident, bashful, and yearning. Whether or not we would call it sexy is perhaps up to the individual reader's taste. There arose in the post-romantic period an association of passionate romantic love, and thus love poetry, with non- and extramarital relationships. This was surely influenced, at least in part, by Shakespeare's sonnets. But in the Protestant love poems of the 17th century, Bradstreet's and Donne's in particular, it is the marital relationship and the marriage bed that is the prime site of deep romance and ecstatic sexual fulfillment. Thankfully, most would agree, Bradstreet keeps us out of her bedroom in a way that Donne does not. But her message is clear. True unitive bliss is being experienced behind those closed doors, and the prudent reader ought to seek out a marriage like Bradstreet's. The reward will not just be personal fulfillment, but also a contribution to a new, virtuous, exemplary American society.